So this study we conducted for a real reason. I had published an article on idiopathic intracranial hypertension at baseline and the visual quality of life associated with this condition. It's a condition of obese women of childbearing age, and one of the major things that bothers these women is that they have headache. Almost 90% of them have headache. And the reviewer of my paper said, well, what's the visual quality of life of women and with migraine and chronic migraine? And so with that I went, ooh, we don't know. The literature has nothing in the literature about visual quality of life in migraine or chronic migraine, and that's why we conducted the study.
And so we found that patients who had chronic migraine, there was a statistically significant difference between them and our controls. So those patients who had chronic migraine had the same visual quality of life as patients who had other chronic ophthalmological conditions, like patients who had idiopathic intracranial hypertension or optic neuritis or patients who had thyroid eye disease.
And I think this is an important point, because if chronic migraine affects the vision of individuals, I mean, this is a huge problem that's much bigger than people ever realized. And then we have to understand why their quality of life, their visual quality of life is so affected. We've known for years that their general quality of life in chronic migraine is affected, but to know that their visual quality of life is affected is extremely important.
So patients who have chronic migraine have a headache at least 15 days a month, and that's how we defined it in the study. And we find that those are the patients who have the worst visual quality of life. And that makes sense, right? Because these patients have chronic headaches, so their visual quality of life is worse. Patients who have episodic headaches, their visual quality of life is not as bad as those patients who have chronic headaches. I think people don't really pay attention to it at all, so it's great to have this type of study.
I don't think that people have really looked at people who have chronic migraine and said, well, what kind of visual problems do you have? Unless they complained about something, they wouldn't really know.
I think it's really important to start paying more attention to the eye. I mean, that's the main thing here, that I think as neurologists, sometimes we don't get as much training in residency on the neuro-ophthalmological conditions as we would like, and so we don't pay as much attention to it. And so that's one of the most important things, that look, these patients have real eye problems and we need to pay attention to it and address it, and that's a huge component in their migraines getting better.
I would just say that I think this has totally been neglected, and that we really need to change that and try to understand what are the components that are driving this very bad quality of life, and then start addressing them, because if we address them, could we make not only the visual quality of life better, but maybe even make the chronic migraine better.